All right, we are live back on the Andre Duke Show with Carter Smith. Carter, how are you doing?
Good, man. I'm doing good. Just hanging out for the week, working a little bit. My kids are on vacation in Hilton Head right now, so I haven't been with them for a couple days. So just getting some things done around the house, taking care of the normal business on week to week. But other than that, man, just hanging out. How about you?
Doing the same. Just got off the T-ball field, and T-ball is T-ball. So
Yeah. I hear that, man. I hear that. Good deal, man. Well, a lot going on. A lot of stuff's come out past couple days in the college football world. Not at all related to football, but some big topics at least and things to talk about as we get, as Richie said, one day closer to football season. Man, just counting it down. These are the not even the dog days of summer yet, but we're getting close.
yep, fall camp is right around the corner.
Absolutely, absolutely. The big thing that I saw, well, one of the big things, talking about, I saw headlines today about the ongoing lawsuit from a former head of, I guess, head of a medical at Penn State, kind of the team doctor or whatever, suing the university and the Penn State Health Department or Penn State Health Division for wrongful termination. Obviously, a lot of that deals directly with James Franklin. So, some of those things that are going on, man. And then I saw yesterday Saquon Barkley and Trace McSorley go out there and, have their guys back, telling Saquon's telling jokes and funny James Franklin stories from his time at Penn State. And just find it all very interesting. Some of the stuff that's being said is pretty worrisome if you're an athlete, but also I'm not 100% sure how much of it is actually something that happened that Franklin did.
Yeah, that's factually correct.
Mhm.
In the I guess in the lawsuit, he's alleging that Franklin tried to interfere with the medical team and things of that sort.
Yeah, basically, my understanding of it is that they were doing things to not necessarily. One of the things is talks about punishing players that are hurt, which is a big no-no. You can't do that. But basically, during the 2018 season, there were a bunch of players that were injured and wouldn't show up for their scheduled medical treatments. And so what Franklin did, which you can't do, and this is why the medical side of a program has to be kind of autonomous from the football side of a program, is Franklin ruled players who didn't show up for their treatment as completely healthy and full go at practices. And so obviously Dr. Scott Lynch is the main person, in the case, basically said, just because they don't show up for treatment doesn't mean they're not injured. So you can't have them out there practicing full go, hitting people, things like that. Apparently Franklin didn't take that very well, and things got a little bit heated. And Dr. Lynch eventually reached out to him to try to smooth it over, and Franklin ignored him. So that's one of the many different incidents that Dr. Lynch is alleging. I'm sure if it was an email thread, that's pretty easy to get documentation of. And then he's also was instructed by Franklin to abstain from using certain medical terms when discussing injuries with players, such as knee injuries, and he didn't like the player being told that it was a lateral meniscus tear or something like that, to which Lynch basically said, hey, I'm not going to lie about the issues a player faces. And then Franklin hung up on him. And, he's essentially trying to manipulate the doctors into allegedly, and I want to say allegedly because this is just Dr. Lynch's side, allegedly manipulate the players into believing their injury is less severe so that they can come back quicker, play faster. And he's also trying to manipulate the players into actually showing up for their appointments, which I don't dislike that one. But you can't have them full go in practice if they're injured. You have to find other punishments for missing a treatment. Like I agree they need to show up for their treatments that are scheduled. That's a waste of everybody's time if they don't. But that doesn't mean you can go out there and practice, right? So have them clean the locker room, have them do other stuff, have them, if it's an upper body injury, have them ride the bike, have them do, other punishments to kind of get them to understand, hey, you have a commitment at this time to be here at treatment. Treatment's important. It's how you're going to get better. But to say, hey, if you miss treatment, that means you're full go. That's just going to further the injury and make things worse. And it's, in the long run, be worse for the player. So I understand the sentiment behind that one because he's trying to teach the players accountability, teach the players responsibility. But he's just going about it the wrong way if that's actually what happened.
Now, I guess my question is this a misunderstanding on an interpretation on if somebody is injured or not?
I don't think so. It doesn't sound like that. It sounds to me more like Franklin is trying to get the doctors to kind of soften the blow and kind of make things seem less severe than they might be so that the player, because mentally, if you think the injury is less and you start feeling better, you're going to be more willing to go full go quicker, right? Like if I tear my ACL and the doctor tells me that it's just a strain or something like that, obviously that's an extreme case. But if my ACL, if I go in and I have my knee scoped and they fix my ACL and I think they were just fixing a strain or whatever, and then I start feeling 100%, well, if I knew I tore my ACL, I might be a lot more hesitant to come back because of the severity of that injury and re-injuring it. But if I think that it's just a strain that I'm rehabbing, then I could come back quicker, is essentially what I think his thought process was on it. Like, hey, we'll still get him the medical treatment. Let's just not make it seem so bad. So I think that's part of it. I also think he was trying to flirt with the line of toughness and logic. And the thing is, this is why these doctors are pretty adamant on being fully autonomous from the head coach. Because if the head coach has his entire salary and reputation and everything tied to winning football games and producing on the field, he's going to be a lot more likely to be lenient on the medical side of things. And B, that doctor's medical license that they worked 7 to 8 years to get is on the line. If a player gets re-injured because he came back too fast, then the doctors are ultimately liable for that. Right? The doctor that cleared him. So that's why these doctors are so big on that full autonomy of like, hey, I have final say on if this kid's ready or not. Now the kid can go get a second opinion from another doctor, and if that doctor clears them, well, now it's on that doctor's license, not mine, right? So that's why that's such a big thing. And when you have a head coach who's trying to kind of blur those lines of autonomy and make it like, hey, you're going to do your job, but I want you to do it the way I want you to do it, then you're taking some of that autonomy away and making it much more difficult for that doctor to, in good conscience, do his job, right? Ultimately led to this doctor being let go because the athletic director and Franklin didn't like the way that he was doing the job because he wasn't willing to bow down, essentially. And so that's where the wrongful termination part of it comes in, because he's saying, hey, I did my job exactly as I should have. These people are trying to oversee something they honestly shouldn't be overseeing. And then they have another doctor, this Dr. Pete Seidenberg, who was the primary care doctor for the team in 2014, who's basically corroborating the story, saying, hey, when I was there, I was also pushed by Franklin and the AD, Sandy Barbour, to medically disqualify a player who attempted suicide to free up a scholarship. Now, that one is a little different, in my opinion, because, and I don't know if that's exactly true. My understanding of the mental health aspects of things with college football is they are, unless Penn State does things differently, I don't know. But at Ohio State, Harry Miller, I don't know if you remember Harry Miller. he was an offensive
Vaguely.
lineman. Yeah, he left the team due to mental health issues. They medically disqualified him, which allowed them to add another scholarship player on their roster, but it didn't take away his scholarship. He was still on a full athletic scholarship, could go to class, everything like that. They just said, hey, what's best for you right now is to not be around the program. You already told us that. So we're going to remove you from the team. You're going to keep your scholarship, though. Now, this one, the doctor is saying they wanted him to be disqualified and that would remove his scholarship. I don't know if that's true, because I know most programs, when it comes to mental health, especially something like attempted suicide, like, listen, if that kid attempted suicide on Tuesday, he is not mentally capable, nor should he be practicing on Thursday. Right, like that's just as a fact. He needs to go get his mind right. He needs to go get help. He needs to do what he needs to do to get himself healthy. And if James Franklin was saying, "Hey, you need to medical this guy, so that way I can add another scholarship player," and he can be away from the team, which he needs to be away from the team. He's not contributing to the team, and the team's not going to be able to help him through this. He needs to go get actual help, right?
Right.
If that's the case and he keeps his scholarship, I 100% believe James Franklin did the right thing trying to pressure that doctor to do that. That would have been what's best for the kid and what's best for the program. And at the end of the day, James Franklin needs to do what's best for the program. But if that kid has a mental health issue, you don't want to just kick him off the team, remove his scholarship, and make it worse, right? So I would need to know more specifics on what exactly that meant for that kid, because my understanding of if you medical a kid, it means that they're no longer on the team. They no longer count towards your scholarship numbers for active players, but they don't lose their scholarship to the university.
And Lane Kiffin dealt with a similar situation. I believe it was I'm not sure of the date, but it was after the season, or it might have been during the season. Kid tried to turn around and sue Ole Miss because they kicked him off the team, or allegedly kicked him off the team. And the last time I looked at their roster, that kid that recorded Lane in the office that they were going to kick off the team because he didn't show up for mental health issues. The lawsuit got withdrawn or dismissed, and they dropped the suit, and then the kid was still on the roster.
Yeah.
So
I'm not 100% sure what ended up happening there. I can tell you that that's a very different situation than what you're dealing with here, or what you were dealing with Harry Miller. Because when it comes to mental health and mental health exemptions for scholarships and everything like that, there's a protocol and there's a sequence of events you have to go through. And I don't mean like you have to attempt suicide to qualify. I just mean you have to let somebody know, go through the proper channels to report it, to do everything you're supposed to do, and then you don't lose your scholarship. You might be removed from the team, but if you're worried about your mental health, that should be the last thing you're worried about, right? You'll be a part of the team when you get healthy, if that's the best thing for you. But what that kid did was he didn't tell anybody anything, disappeared, agreed to come meet with Coach
Lane Kiffin.
Coach Kiffin, yeah, and then never showed up for the meeting, and then came in unannounced, demanded a meeting, and Kiffin sat down with him, and then he recorded him kicking him off the team, where Kiffin had grounds to do so because he hadn't done the things he needed to do in order to remain a part of the team during that mental health leave. So a little bit different situation. I mean, obviously, as somebody that struggled with mental health, as somebody that knows a lot of people that have struggled with mental health, it's not always the easiest thing to follow the right steps or to do the protocols or to do what you need to do when you're in that headspace, right? So I feel for the kid because he was probably going through something pretty awful for him. And maybe it was just so mentally draining and physically draining that he couldn't bring himself to go through the proper channels and to do what he needed to do, which sucks. That's not something anybody wants to go through or wants someone else to go through. But at the same time, it's kind of a tough situation.
It's a catch-22 no matter how you look at it, because if you DQ a kid and the kid gets better, I mean, he could potentially play again. So
yeah, for sure. And that's, and that's why, and that's why they have the medical exemptions and things like that, because it's not DQing a kid. All it's doing is removing him from counting towards your scholarship players for that period of time. If he gets better and he comes back, well, we'll rework the scholarships again to get you back on the active roster. It's just like sending somebody either down to the minors or to the practice squad. Like, if you improve or the IR, if you get better, we'll rework the roster to make sure you're on the active roster. But until you get better, we need to field the best possible team. And having one of those scholarships taken up by a kid that isn't mentally able to do what is required isn't the best thing for the team. And it's not even the best thing for you, because you're going to be required to show up for meetings. You're going to be, and we can't, it's better this way for both parties.
Yeah, to split so nobody gets hurt and there's no legal issues, and it's protecting the kid and the program at the same time.
And it's not even a total split. Like, you don't travel with the team. You can still come around the facility. You can still be around the team when you feel up to it. It's just you can't participate in practice. You can't do things, but those things you shouldn't be doing when you're worried about your mental health anyways. You need to be, you can come work out if you want to. You can't be part of team workouts because those are strenuous, stressful environments and probably not what's best for you. But if you want to come lift and get your mind right when they're practicing or when kids are at class or whatever, you can absolutely have access to the facility. But it's not a total split. It's just giving you the opportunity to take some time to be away from the game of football, because obviously you've been around the game of football for a couple years if you're in a program for 2 or 3 years, and it's led you to this point. So take a break, go figure out what you need to do for yourself. We'll support you as much as we possibly can. And then if you get healthy and you get your mind right and you're ready to come back, all means, we'll welcome you back. You're part of this team. You're part of this family,
Right. And I think that the people that are involved in this is going to be a real sticky situation. And I just as the leader of a major Power 5 program, and you have all of this kicking off to a certain extent, I think that, you want to handle all your problems internally, but I don't think it should have got to this point.
No, definitely not. And we're talking a lot about the kids involved, which is ultimately what matters, right? I mean, that's what making sure you're doing the right thing for the kids or the young men, whatever. I mean, now they're being paid. So I guess the professionals or whatever you want to call them, they're 18-year-old kids, 19, 20-year-old kids. You need to make sure you're doing what's best for them 100% of the time. If that's having them leave the program to get healthy, if that's making sure you give them enough time to recover from an injury, whatever it is. But the only reason this is coming to light, because even if this is all true, what Dr. Lynch is alleging, and Franklin's been pushing kids to come back quicker than they should have and things like that, ultimately it would be a very different story if this was an athlete suing the university and them over getting injured because of that. This is a doctor who lost his job because he couldn't get along with the head coach, and he's suing for wrongful termination. Now, he might have evidence of all this, and it could lead to a deeper investigation that ultimately leads to something negative for James Franklin. But at the end of the day, as much as I don't think James Franklin is a top-tier football coach, and I think he is probably going to maintain his 9-3, 10-2 record at Penn State every year, I don't believe he's a bad person that doesn't want what's best for the kid. So this is all kind of a irrelevant argument. I don't know of any specific situations where he pushed this doctor or any doctor to have a kid come back. The kid came back and got re-injured really quickly in a catastrophic way. If there were
Right.
some of those, this would be a much bigger topic and a much bigger conversation and would have much larger ramifications for James Franklin. At the end of the day, this is a guy who is upset that he lost his job and doesn't think he did anything to lose his job. That's it.
Right. And I guess we'll keep following the story.
Yeah, it'll get interesting. And I don't know. I mean, obviously, having former players come out and support the head coach is always good, especially when you get somebody of Saquon's caliber. But, you know, I always take that with a grain of salt. There's always going to be players that love a coach, and there's always going to be players that hate a coach. Look at Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern. They all wore free Fitzgerald shirts. And to be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure he should have lost his job. But either way, what was going on in that program wasn't appropriate or acceptable. So you're going to have players that like a coach because he's tough and he does that and he fights for you to get back on the field and like everything like that. And then you're going to have players that are like, dude, I lost my starting job because I wouldn't come back quick enough. Fuck that guy.
Yeah.
So,
and I guess we'll slide to the next topic. But if you're out there watching, come on over to YouTube if you're watching on Twitter, and also hit the like and subscribe button. Carter put together the show today, helping me out. We got
so if it sucks, I'm sorry. No.
So we got a Notre Dame update.
Yeah, man. So I was looking, and you know, we haven't been talking heavy Notre Dame the past couple weeks. Again, it's a really slow time for college football. There's not a whole lot to talk about. Players have been off. Coaches are going on vacation here in a couple weeks. There's just not a lot going on at the program, right? But there is, some cool things that have happened in the past couple days. Obviously, everybody loves the schedule releases that the NFL does, and college football is not quite the same level. But we did get some game times for at least all the home games. Obviously, we've known for a couple weeks, I believe, that Texas A&M Week 1 at Kyle Field is going to be a 7:30 p.m. night game, probably one of the biggest games of that weekend. Going to be a crazy atmosphere. But we got we got the home slate now, which is I don't know. I don't know if I want to say I'm disappointed. When you look at the home opponents, there's not a whole lot more you could ask. So every game is at 3:30, pretty much. You got Miami of Ohio 3:30 on NBC and Peacock, Louisville 3:30 on Peacock only, which I have Peacock because I watch Notre Dame. That's the only reason. Stanford 3:30 NBC and Peacock, and then Virginia 3:30 NBC and Peacock. The one big game they have at home this year is the Seminoles of Florida State. And that one is going to be a nice 7:30 night game in South Bend. Going to be under the lights, have the lights shining on Touchdown Jesus. It's going to be an atmosphere that will rival every atmosphere that's been at Notre Dame. Every single one. It might not get to the level of Ohio State last year or the Bush Push game back in 2008, maybe. Anyways, whatever year. 7. I think it was 7. But either way, back in those years, might not get to that level. It just depends on what happens in the first, 8, 9, 10 weeks, whatever it is. But that night game against Florida State, man, that's going to be a big one. That is going to be the game in South Bend. Obviously, they'll have to go on the road at USC, which most likely will be either a night game or at earliest 3:30 because it's out in LA, but probably 7:30 kick for that one. And then other than that, I don't see many other potential night games on the schedule. But, that'll be fun.
Because they got that game with Georgia Tech in Atlanta, which I know, that's serving an agenda because they know Notre Dame travels really well and they want to have it.
It's obviously technically a home game for Georgia Tech, but it's not being played at Georgia Tech, right? It's going to be played at Mercedes Stadium. It's a kind of neutral site game, but not really a neutral site game. And then they have obviously the Shamrock series and stuff like that, which those ones are during the day a lot. So it probably might be during the day, but I mean, at At bare minimum, they have 2 night games, 2 primetime games this year. They'll probably end up with 3 or 4, which is great. I mean, and this just dives into the schedule. And this is why I know we've had a lot of people comment on videos saying we're flip-flopping on our predictions for Notre Dame and stuff like that. Guys, we haven't flip-flopped once, okay? We said Duke said Notre Dame's going 12-0. He said he believes they could run the table. I said 11-1, maybe 10-2, but most likely 11-1. I've never changed from that opinion. On the video that everybody commented on saying we're flip-floppers and all this stuff, we were talking about things that needed to change within the program for them to go 12-0 and 11-1. I believe that those things will change this year and that they will do that. However, if they don't and they end up going 9-3, I think Marcus Freeman is squarely on the hot seat. That's all I said. There was no flip-flops. There was no changing opinions. It was all very cut and dry. And when you look at this schedule, and I've run it down more times than I can count, this is one of the weakest schedules in Notre Dame history. It's not going to live up to the normal strength of schedule. I looked at strength of schedule numbers right before the show. Last year, even with their kind of weaker schedule, they didn't have a ton of the big games. They lucked out that Louisville was as good as they were. They had a good Duke team before Riley Leonard got injured, and things like that. They had the 13th best strength of schedule after bowl games and playoff games. So Michigan and Washington had number 1, but that's because they each played an extra game against the top 2 teams in the country. And so they had a borderline top 10 schedule last year, even with some of the weaker opponents they played. Notre Dame consistently has a top 10 strength of schedule in the country. This year's is not going to be that. Outside, we've labeled it. There's 3 really tough games with a potential 4th that's okay.
Well, and you got Navy on there, but if you look at the schedule for what it really is, USC's a wild card, and I'm just going in reverse order because of where I'm at. Yeah. USC's a wild card. You don't know what they're going to be on defense, and the offense is probably going to be pretty good. Could that game be a shootout? Most likely, yes, but it's the last game of the year, and then you got Army at Yankee Stadium, and I don't care what anybody says. I'm not a big fan of playing. It's not that I'm not a big fan of the school and what Army and Navy stand for, but those could potentially be tough games. And then Virginia, I don't think Virginia's been good since Chris Long's been there. Yeah, and then Florida State obviously is going to be a formidable opponent. Navy, who knows? Could be a tough game. Georgia Tech, I don't know that. I mean, they beat Miami last year on a fluke. Georgia Tech is a wild card to me. Stanford is not very good. Could they be better this year? Maybe. I don't know, but we got to see it. Louisville, they had a bunch of kids transfer out, and they had a bunch of kids transfer in. So Coach Brom down there is, bus tossing the roster, and I think they'll be maybe a formidable opponent. And then Miami of Ohio, they're probably not going to be very good.
No.
And then you have Purdue. And outside of the big games, Purdue is the one that's concerning because you're going to get on a bus and you're going to drive down to West Lafayette.
Mm-hmm.
And there is something about playing at Purdue when you're a highly ranked opponent. Ask Urban Meyer about it.
Do they have Rondell Moore still?
That's what say what it is, but Purdue is something to keep an eye on. And then Northern Illinois is another MAC school. Notre Dame should beat them. And then the biggest question mark on the schedule is the first game of the year, Texas A&M, which, to add a caveat on the side of that, I mean, they got some weird stuff going down there at College Station. With the fraternities, and it's cultish, and
but that's Texas, man. It's all like that. But
it's
no, I mean, listen, the way I break down Notre Dame's schedule, and I've had to excuse me, as a Notre Dame fan, I've had to fight this fight for years. Oh, you guys played a Big Ten schedule, or if you guys played an SEC schedule, you'd go 8-4 every year. Listen, we play the equivalent of that most years. This year, I'll agree, it's not up to par. But if you look at the schedule, right, always have one good out of conference opponent. That's Texas A&M this year. Okay. Then you play your MAC schools, just like Ohio State does, Northern Illinois and Miami, Ohio. Usually play at least one Big Ten school. Now, it used to be Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue. We get Purdue, not the greatest program. Then you play an ACC schedule with your rivals in Stanford, who's usually a better program than it has been recently. It's down, so it hurts. But the ACC did Notre Dame no favors as far as strength of schedule goes. Did a ton of favors as far as W's go, because the ACC opponents they got this year are Louisville, Georgia Tech, Florida State, and Virginia. If that was Louisville, Clemson, Florida State, Miami, that's a totally different schedule, right? And then you obviously have Navy and the service academies, but I equate the service academies. Notre Dame doesn't play Grambling State. Notre Dame doesn't play, Chattanooga and stuff like that. Like our Chattanoogas and Gramblings and whatever are Navy and Army. Much tougher opponents to play, in my opinion. And then we always play USC, who's historically a great program and one of the greatest rivalries in football. So strength of schedule-wise, Notre Dame plays as tough a schedule as almost any conference, other than maybe the SEC now. You look at just ask Florida, right? But yeah. I mean, I wouldn't wish Florida's schedule on anybody. And like I've said to a lot of people is come talk to me after the season. Everybody's like, I'll bet I'll be back after the season. Yeah, come talk to me, man. 5. That's the max for Florida. But here, we'll show this. Michigan last year didn't play anybody non-conference. Committee doesn't care. Yeah, exactly. Why would you want to have a tough out-of-conference schedule anymore? There's no reason to. Now, obviously, Notre Dame's not in a conference, so they have to have tough games other than the 4 or 5 cupcakes that you have out of conference if you're the SEC or the Big Ten. But the funny thing about that is Michigan didn't play anybody out of conference, right? And they had the number 1 toughest schedule in the country, according to the FPI rankings. Why? Because they made the playoff and they played the 2 toughest teams in the playoff. But their regular season schedule wasn't that tough up until Ohio State. Right. And Ohio State had to play Notre Dame. And I mean, the strength of schedule stuff, I agree. Notre Dame's schedule this year is down. It's not as strong as it normally is. However, it normally is a very strong component of what Notre Dame is, because Notre Dame's easy games outside of the 1 or 2 MAC schools they might play are Navy, Army, and then their other out-of-conference games are a MAC school and USC and Stanford.
And normally they'll flip-flop each year. They'll have Florida State on the schedule for a little bit, and then they'll flip and have Clemson on the schedule a little bit.
Yeah, they always have at least one.
And those are and it's a home and away. So one year you get them at home, next year you get them away.
Yeah. And like up until their recent partnership with the ACC, they played Florida State, Miami, one of those 2 normally, and then they played Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue, USC. Like they played a lot of Big Ten schools and SEC school or ACC schools and Pac-12 schools. And then they played 2 service academies, and then they played 2 MAC schools. So I don't get the argument. But I mean, this year I get it. I agree their schedule is not as easy, or is easier than normal. But regardless of that, the home games are going to be fun. I love 3:30 kickoffs. I know. I don't know if a lot of people don't like them, but I love them. I think they're my favorite time.
If I'm going to go up there, I'll go to a 3:30 game before a noon game because I like to partake in South Bend the night before, and then getting up and going to a noon game is no fun. But
it's also a lot easier for me to get to a 3:30 game than a noon game, because if I don't want to go up the night before, I can wake up early and drive and still have time to tailgate.
Yeah. Also, did you see what I put in the private chat?
No, I did not. Hold on one second.
I don't announce that publicly, but
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. But so yeah, the schedule's going to be great. The home games are going to be fun. I'm going to do everything I can to find a way to get there November 9th for the Florida State game. I think that'll be a great environment. And then other than that, the only other one I'm even looking at going to is maybe Louisville. Yeah, that's probably the only one I want to go to. Yeah, but it'll be fun either way. Now, having said that, I did hear some extremely disappointing news, and I hate to break this news on the podcast, but I found out a couple days ago, May 25th, that 2024 will be Marcus Freeman's last year in South Bend. And where is he going, you might ask? Where is he going, you might ask? He's definitely going to an upgrade like Brian Kelly did, right? Going to an LSU. Maybe, I don't know, Kirby Smart retires. I don't know how many programs are considered an upgrade over Notre Dame. But no, he's going to Arkansas.
Where are we pulling this from?
Oh yeah, no, this is the Right Way Sports Network released that they had it on good authority that the Arkansas Razorbacks, which have been down for a few years and they're not going to compete with the powerhouses in the SEC this year, are looking to replace Coach Pittman with Marcus Freeman. I don't know if the Arkansas beat is just feeling themselves because they were able to get John Calipari because Kentucky didn't want him anymore, or what's going on. But in what world does any rational person believe that Marcus Freeman is going to leave Notre Dame to become the head coach at Arkansas? That's never going to happen. The only way that happens is if the Irish go 7-5 and his ass is fired.
And then I don't think Arkansas will hire you, but
I don't know what else they're going to get. But so I looked into this because I was like, dude, what? I think this Sports Network is a bunch of guys that are just putting out the most outlandish shit possible. And yeah, I think that's what it has to be because there's no way anybody actually believes this. And so I looked into this, the Right Way Sports Network, which was founded by a guy named Malik Wright, who I Googled him and tried to research him. He's never done anything. He's a CEO of some media company. But I just couldn't believe it that this got traction, that people on Twitter were saying, oh, Marcus Freeman's going to leave for Arkansas. Like, come on, man. Let's get out of here. Yeah, exactly, Sean. The same guys that are saying that shit. So Notre Dame fans, I hate to break it to you, but no matter what happens this year, Marcus Freeman's gone. He's going to Arkansas. Him and John Calipari are going to turn that into the powerhouse of college football and basketball. And, hopefully he wins a natty before he goes, and then we can all cheers him on the way out.
They are going to roast us on the comments of this video. They are going to absolutely eviscerate us.
I hope everybody knows the sarcastic nature in what I just said is coming from. Like, there's no way that's happening, right?
There is somebody somewhere that we're going to get clipped up and we are going to end up on TikTok.
That's fine, man. Blow it up for us. Love it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But the only way that Marcus Freeman doesn't go to Arkansas is if this one man can stay healthy. And I have a little bit of an update. Mr. Riley Leonard himself, the quarterback, the number 1 in your hearts, number 12 in your playbook or your programs. I forget what number he's going to be. I think
13.
12, but 13. Okay. He's feeling good. I heard the update after the spring game, said his ankle is feeling better than it has in a long, long time, which was good. But then I saw an update this week that he's out there running. He's been jogging for a couple weeks. I think he's doing some sprints, controlled environment, not out there running, against anybody or doing anything like that. Obviously, they're not even really practicing right now. But he's out there. He's running sprints. He's doing better, which is good news. It's good news for Notre Dame fans because a lot of this season is going to hang on having his experience and leadership at quarterback. The quarterback position at Notre Dame has been well documented on this podcast. Steve Angeli looks like he could be serviceable, but in order to get to where you need to go, I don't think DJ Carr is ready, and I don't think Angeli can do it. And Riley Leonard's really your only option. So that's good news. He's working out. He's getting better. Everything looks to be working and trending in the right direction that he might be ready. Maybe not 100% full go by the start of fall camp, but at least be able to participate and not have to keep taking those stupid mental reps that he was taking at the spring game, which is good news because that's what this season comes down to. Obviously, there's question marks on the offensive line. There's question marks at receiver. There's question marks all over the place. But if you don't have a guy at the quarterback position, you're not going to be able to win anything of consequence. And this is the year I think Marcus Freeman has to at least win 10 to I think 11 games is really where he should be. So, but 10-2, he'll probably still get in the playoff, which would be considered a success. 11, it depends on who he loses to. If he goes out and loses to freaking Virginia or something, then maybe not. But if he loses Texas A&M week 1 and Florida State or something like that, or USC, 10-2 might still get you in. But I think he needs to go 11-1. And honestly, I think he needs to win a playoff game, not to keep his job. He'll keep his job as long as he makes the playoffs. And probably even if he doesn't, if he goes 10-2. But I think this is a big year for him, and not having that quarterback position solidified would be a huge problem going into fall camp. So getting Riley Leonard back is going to be huge. It looks like, from what I'm hearing and what I've read, that he is on track to be ready to go for most of fall camp, which is that's great news for Notre Dame fans.
Yeah, then getting him healthy and the stupid, yeah, they're not stupid, but the mental reps thing, it was just played out for me.
Yeah, I mean, you when a guy can't practice, you have to do as much as you possibly can. So I get it, but it looks like he's trending in the right direction. Every report that I've seen, everything I've heard, he's working out a lot. He's getting better. He's getting back to 100%. And hopefully he'll get there. And the biggest thing at this point in the rehab process is you want to progress and you want to push him along, but you don't want to push him too fast, which is why if he's not ready to go at the start of fall camp 100%, I'm not going to be concerned. If he's ready to go 100%, I'm going to be a little bit worried about the potential to re-injure that, because this kid has had a bad history of injuries. And the way he plays football, when he's effective, it lends itself to injuries. He likes to use his feet. He likes to run. He plays with a certain aggressiveness to him, which makes him a good player, but it puts him in a position where he could get re-injured pretty easily. So you want to be very careful about how you do it. But it's great news if he's progressing the way that they're saying he is.
Right. And the ankle is what concerns me in the quarterback run game.
Oh, for sure.
And
just ask Ohio State fans.
Yes. And rounding out the Notre Dame stuff, huge recruiting victory. Mark Zachary, Ben Davis High School, Indianapolis, commits to Notre Dame.
Huge get. This is a huge get. I said when we broke down the recruiting stuff a couple weeks ago that, first of all, I said they have to keep their commits, which it looks like they are right now. There's rumblings that they could lose a player or two, which I said they probably will. Hopefully it's not one of their top guys. But when you look at this recruiting class right now, adding Mark Zachary, who's the number 6 corner in the country, he's a 4-star guy, had offers from Bama, Georgia, Florida, all these big programs, and he commits to Notre Dame a couple days ago. Really big get. You'd hate to lose somebody like that out of the state of Indiana, because Indiana's not ripe with talent the way that Ohio, Georgia, Texas, Florida, California are. So when you have big time recruits in the state of Indiana, it's really important for Notre Dame to get those guys. Notre Dame has a very national footprint of recruiting, so they don't have to in order to have a good class, but it's sure as hell a lot easier, right? So you got to get those guys. And so landing him, that gives them 2 top 10 corners in the class, with Zachary and then also Dallas Golden. Obviously, you gotta hold on to Golden and hope that he doesn't flip, because I think he's a little bit of a flight risk coming out of Florida. And then obviously Ivan Taylor, it seems like a solid commit, shouldn't be a problem. Deuce Knight, you hope you can keep, and you need to keep. And then outside of that, I mean, it's a pretty stacked class. I mean, right now the number one ranked class in the country, which is huge. I said early on when they were number 1 that guys don't expect it to stay there. You know how these big time boys play, right? Georgia, Bama, Ohio State, those guys load up at the end of classes, and they load up with 5-star talent. So I love that they're number 1. It's great. I would love for it to finish top 5. I think that's where you want to finish, is a top 5 class this year, because you have such a strong lead with the number of commitments you already have. I think this puts it at like 23. So they're only going to take maybe 2 more players in the class, assuming everybody stays. Now, obviously, you're still recruiting probably 10 to 20 guys right now, because it's recruiting and you can never be safe, or you're never safe. But a huge getting a guy who's a consensus 4-star, borderline 5-star, top 100 player. I said it. That's what you need in order to round out this class. You can add some 3-stars at the end to bolster your numbers and things like that, but you got to load this with top end talent, especially with how early it is. You're going to lose some of them, guys. You just hope it's not the big ones.
And with wrapping that up, let's get to the topic du jour, the gift that keeps on giving.
Dude, what the fuck is going on at Colorado? Like, I don't like, and I get it. The thing, and comments will roast us for that too, but I get it. This was, back in whatever year. Kid was 15. I don't know how old he is now. Might be 25 for all I know. But like, just, I don't know how much everybody's looked into this. I've watched interviews, I've read articles. I mean, I really dove into this when it came out, because I was like, what the fuck? This kid that is apparently a baller. Like, yeah, he's not making Shador money. I get that. He's not the quarterback. But Coach Prime is telling us that his sons are fucking set for life. His sons are balling. And Travis Hunter's balling. And the NIL at Colorado is balling. And he's filing for Chapter 7 bankruptcy? Well, that's not balling at all. Not that there's anything wrong with filing for bankruptcy if that's what you need to do. I mean, trust me, I get it. But it stems from, and I watched the guy's interview on the Jason Whitlock podcast, which I want to preface this by saying I'm not a Jason Whitlock fan. So I don't agree with a lot of Jason Whitlock stuff. But I agree with a lot of what that guy said. And it's just interesting, because I think the more and more, aside from what happened is a bad look, assaulting a security officer, doing all that shit, and then now filing bankruptcy to get out of having to pay them and everything like that. Not the best look, especially when you're flaunting how much money you guys have. And Deion is a whole nother story that we can get into. But it just doesn't look good, right? Like, if you're balling, then ball. But it's just a bad look, man. And then on top of that, knowing what, man, Deion, I think Deion is just in over his head. Honestly, I think he has built this persona that is Prime. And I don't know if that's actually who Deion is. I really hope it's not, because he's kind of a shitbag. But he's built this persona, and he has to protect that persona and that brand, even at the peril of his own kids. And that's just not, that's not good with me. And so basically, anybody that, if you haven't heard, I don't know what you've been doing the past 2 days, but Shilo Sanders, Deion's son, who's a starting safety for Colorado. When he was 15, he was at like a prep academy or, one of those schools that
Deion
Deion,
owned.
Deion owned and was the CEO of. He got in some trouble and he was allegedly shooting dice at the school, which like, man, I really don't care if you're shooting dice at school. Like I used to gamble at school and do shit like we're just fucking around. We're 15 years old, right? But he got caught doing it. You're not allowed to do that. And he went off and just started berating the teachers and whoever was around him, saying like, "Man, do you know who my dad is? Like, what are you doing?" And that right there is just an entitlement thing. Deion's obviously cultivated that culture in his house for his entire life. Deion believes that about him, and he's just smart enough, I guess, not to get in trouble, really. But ultimately, he's on the phone, which I don't know if you guys nowadays it's different because my nephew and stuff will be texting me during school, and I'm like, bro, how do you have your phone? Like I wasn't allowed to have my phone in school. What are you doing? You're sitting there super chatting on freaking Zach's podcast in the middle of the day. How are you doing this? And it's a different day. They can have their phones, but I guess at that school at that time they weren't allowed to have their phones. And so Shadur is walking through the halls on the phone with his mom, and the security guard gets told about it, and he comes up. He's like, "Hey, you can't be on your phone." And Deion loses it on him again. Like, you know who my dad is, da 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 da. And so the security guard is trying to defuse the situation, trying to figure it out. Takes him in his office. Is like, "Hey, listen, like you can't use your phone. I'm gonna let you call your mom on my phone. That way, you're not using your phone, not breaking a rule. But I just want you to calm down, talk to your mom, whatever." Well, it also happened to be the same time that Deion and this kid's mom were going through a pretty nasty split up or divorce or custody battle, something. And so Deion has his assistant go down there and gets on the phone with the security guard. And he's like, "Hey, he can't be on the phone with his mom. Absolutely not. You need to take that phone from him right now." And he's like, "Dude, I don't want to." He's like, No. I have full custody of him. He's not allowed to talk to his mom. That's just no.
And I quote the phrase that
Yeah,
Deion used when he had talked to the guy. He said, "My brother in Christ." So
yeah.
with all of that going on, and one of the guys that was at the school is on the staff at Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
Andre Hart was there,
Mm-hmm.
and the crux that I got of this, the guy tells the story on Jason Whitlock's show, and the concerning thing for me was when all of this transpired, the security guard in the Dallas area was the baseball coach and was like a pillar of the community. He had a contract with Steve Harvey. And won various NAACP awards down there. And he was doing,
which all that's obviously verifiable, so he's not lying about it.
And he goes to work with Deion, and I'm not really torn on this, but you get through where you're at, and then this happens in the breezeway, and camera footage came up missing, which is really strange. I would think that would be unfortunate if Deion did that.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think the thing about it is, and I'll show this comment first, and then I'll jump into it. But I agree. The incident is water under the bridge now. the issue with this right here, I don't disagree with you. I mean, if you have $500K in assets, filing bankruptcy seems weird. It definitely seems like why would you do that or what? But think about it this way: if your net worth, not even net worth, it would be your net assets are 500,000. If your debt is 12 million, right? You're bankrupt. You have no way to pay that debt right now. Now, future income, everything that he could potentially make could lead you to believe that he could pay that debt eventually, and maybe, but that's why they're filing it now, right? That's why they filed the bankruptcy now, to try to get rid of that debt before he potentially gets an NFL contract, before he gets bigger endorsement deals, before anything else happens that makes him have the means to pay that debt right now. And okay, the settlement was 12 million. He asked for 42. So
that's the number they settled on. So
yeah,
it's hard for me to believe that that you're gonna come out of this unscathed.
Well, the thing, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
And it's wild to me because you have Shilo on all of these commercials and things of that sort. So if he's only getting $250K a season, then where are we getting all this stuff that's on Instagram with the cars, the
well, and so that's why
jewelry.
his assets were listed at like 492,000, and then his lawyer went in and adjusted that down to 350,000 because the chains, he has almost $150,000 worth of jewelry. That's not an asset because it's not his. It's on loan, dude, from an NIL deal with like Saki Diamonds or whatever. So like he doesn't own a lot of that shit. He's allowed to use it to promote the brand on Instagram, but he doesn't own any of it. The other thing that is crazy is all of his NIL deals, which this is just smart business, what he's doing, by the way. I get that it's fucking shitty for the bodyguard or the security guard that's getting fucked over right now. But all of his NIL deals go through an LLC. So that can't personally be tied to him in a bankruptcy filing. He can file personal bankruptcy and his LLC can be doing great. And as long now any income that he generates from that LLC that he pays to himself, right? That's income that can be taken and given to the security guard that he owes money to. But if I'm Deion Sanders' kid, why do I have to pay myself from my LLC? My dad can see everything that's going in there and he can just give me money when I need it, knowing that there's millions of dollars sitting in this LLC that once the bankruptcy goes through and I'm rid of this debt, I can access all that money now after a certain amount of time. And if my dad has the money to provide the life I need for 5 to 7 years, what do I need that money for? That's just money for later. So that's where I think it's kind of shitty. But on top of that, the thing that I think is the shittiest and what I think is maybe the biggest problem with all of this, outside of the fact that he beat the guy up, I listen, you have a son, I have a son. If my son at 15 years old made a huge mistake, I would do anything I could to help him through that and get him out of that unscathed, within reason. Right? I wouldn't, obviously, if he murdered somebody, I'm not going to try to cover it up for him or anything like that. But I'm going to try to help him, which is where I think Deion thinks he's doing, is he's trying to help him through this in a way that it doesn't hurt him, but that's going to hurt him longer in the long run. But what's shitty about it is I believe, and again, this is taking what the security guard said at face value. I believe if Deion handled this, if Deion sat down and talked with them and said, hey, Shilo fucked up. I'm really sorry. I know you're in a bad spot. What can we do to make this right? And then it just goes through a man-to-man conversation, knowing that this is a 15-year-old kid. He's not even close to developed enough to make decisions. And we can fix this. But the thing that Deion did was he completely ignored him, wouldn't answer his call, wouldn't talk to him, and then went out on TMZ and deemed that it was his fault. And it's like, dude, okay, now you've created an enemy. Not only that, now you're trying to get your son out of it through bankruptcy and things like that. You're teaching your son that because we are who we are, consequences don't matter. There's no consequences for your actions. You have to understand that. Like, that's the biggest thing. Yeah, right. Exactly. I'm with you. I'm with you on that. I mean, exactly. And that's the thing is like, and that's why, the show is titled what it is. Deion hasn't commented on this. Deion comments on everything. Deion comments on random players that transferred because they're popping off about the program. Deion's been silent because Deion knows he doesn't have a leg to stand on, because everything he's done has been in self-preservation, and there's no consequences for the actions if you're a Sanders. And that's ultimately going to be the downfall of all these kids.
And the lawsuit originated from a workman's comp claim, because the school was trying to stiff workman's comp like 230 G's. And
no, he wasn't. Well, I mean, he might have tried to stiff him after, but no, what it was is workers' comp. When you get hurt at work, workers' comp pays your medical bills, pays your wages, does whatever it has to do. Well, after a while, workman's comp is going to go, bro, this is kind of expensive. We should look into this. And $230,000, they look into it and they go, oh, wait, the owner and CEO, his son beat up the guy that we were taking care of, and Deion's the one that told him to take the phone? That seems like liability. So we're going to go after that too. Trust me, I've dealt with workers' comp. It's a bitch. They don't fuck around. They're worse than the IRS. But
because they want their money.
Yeah, they want it now. Fucking JG Wentworth.
Yes.
But regardless, I think what he's doing is all this story is doing, and this story is old, and this story is not new. And the bankruptcy is, I get it from a business perspective. I understand why you file bankruptcy. And that's why they're doing it. It's a business. His kids are businesses to him. Like, he cares about it. Exactly, JG Wentworth. Thank you. But his kids are businesses to him. There are profits, not for him, but he's trying to set them up so that they can blow up the way he did, and in different ways, because there's so many different avenues now. But so he's trying to prevent a catastrophic event that happened in high school from keeping his son from achieving what he thinks he can achieve. But the problem with that is the lessons you're teaching him are going to impact him negatively for the rest of his life. He's never going to understand that there's consequences to your actions. And on top of that, it's just it's a microcosm of what the Colorado program is right now. And it's why Colorado is not going to be successful under Deion Sanders. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's all a show. It's all bravado. And there's no substance to it. And what he says isn't true, in that that's not who he is. He's putting on a persona.
To me, it's wild that with everything that transpired, the guy gets injured, he wins the lawsuit, and you still do not want to pay him.
Well, and the craziest part about that, and we'll wrap it up here in a minute, but the craziest part about that is He won the lawsuit because Shilo didn't even fucking show up.
Yes.
It was a default victory. There was no trial. Like, they went to court, Shilo didn't show up, and they went, oh, I rule in the favor of the defendant or the plaintiff. It's like, oh, okay, well, that was easy. Like,
Well,
all you had to do was show up, and
well,
maybe you could win.
and Carter, I just don't understand the parallel universe, and I have major questions um about what CU looked at, because they can't say that they did not know about this.
Yeah, I mean, they I guarantee they knew about this, and the the conversation was, I mean, that's really nothing. Like, he's got money. What does it matter? Like,
And
who
why
cares?
wouldn't you just pay the man for something your kid did, and you just pay the
Well,
man? You pay the man and you make it go away. Does it suck? Yes. Uh, but having accountability to pay the guy, no, we wouldn't even be talking about this.
yeah, that's true. That's
And
true. But
in your
and that might be a bigger red flag than anything.
because going forward, Deion always says, "I got time today." Well, I bet in which
He doesn't have time right now.
the CUB, if any of them had a pair of nuts on them, they would ask him about it.
Yeah, well, they won't.
And
he's the
because
cash cow, bro.
because because you can't, you know how whenever there's a legal proceeding going on, if somebody that's in the middle of something, they'll say, well, it's in the middle of litigation and we can't comment on that.
No comment at this time, or blah blah blah.
Yeah, the typical media trained answer. You can't tell me that this is not conducive going forward for anybody involved at all.
No, but and it's crazy the way it's coming out, because, and here's the other thing I'll say, and I'm not. You have to understand that a lot of what this is based on is one man's story. Now, there are some corroborators on both sides, but it's, and I'm not saying he's lying or anything like that. I believe what he's saying is true, and I've seen the videos. I understand the situation, but there might be the way I look at almost everything that I hear is that involves two people. Is there's his story, and most times her story, or his story and his story, and somewhere in the middle is the truth, right? I don't know if this is the case with this one, but I'm just saying there might be parts that the security guard is embellishing or kind of blowing up, but
well,
I don't think the story is even the story, right? Like the altercation is really a mute point at this time.
I think it's really hard to fake a neck injury that he sustained, a broken neck and
no
permanent
I'm not
nerve
saying
damage.
that. No, but like, does anybody really know if Deion was on the phone and told him to grab the phone?
That is up for interpretation,
right? And like, there's little things here and there where it's like, I don't know that to be true because I wasn't there. I believe he is telling the truth because he seems like an honest dude, but there's no way to corroborate that, right? Like, Deion's not going to admit to it, and he hasn't. Now, the one thing I will say is, in the CPS tapes, he is on record as saying that the security guard did nothing wrong, and now he's saying he did.
And so, in the deposition, there is a clip where he does say that, we got to pay this man because you're asking for money because you don't want to work, and you put the guy on TMZ. I would say, Deion, you're eating this one, dog.
Yeah, and then that's, I mean, but and that's the other part that is very interesting. If you watch that interview, Deion isn't tied to it at all.
And I don't know how he got out of it.
I don't know either. But it's not tied to Deion's assets, because that shit would be paid like that.
Oh, yeah.
If Deion makes and has what he says he has, which I'm assuming he has at least $12 million. But he got his name off that lawsuit somehow. I don't know how. The security guard doesn't know how, but it's solely on Shilo and his ex-wife, which she doesn't matter at this point. Like, she's getting pennies on the dollar. It doesn't matter.
Well,
but
in
it's
Deion,
amazing. Yeah,
Deion had full custody of him. And
yeah.
Why would you name his mother on the lawsuit? And it's just like the whole thing as a whole is bizarre, and there's nobody taking accountability. And then this guy's story's been suppressed for so long, and then it didn't only come to light until Shilo filed for bankruptcy and people looked into it, and that he's got a $12 million judgment. And
and that's just like I said, it's a microcosm of the problems at Colorado. The problems with Deion Sanders is he shifted accountability from himself to his own son. He has the means to take care of this, and he shifted it to his son and is now advising his son to file for bankruptcy to get out of it.
Right.
I'm sorry. Like, that just to me is, if my son was going through something and I was even remotely involved, I would be the first one to stand up and be like, hey, put it on me. I can handle it. Even if I didn't have the means to handle it, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to be like, hey, that was me. That's on me. That's on me. Don't fuck this kid's life up. That's on me. I did that. Because even if I don't have the means, I'd rather have that follow me and my son have a fair shot at life without, and not saying that his son didn't do anything wrong and shouldn't have to pay the consequences, but I would rather pay for my son's actions and reprimand him and discipline him and correct him in my own way than to have him have to deal with that in a way that could fuck his entire future. Because I'm a grown man. I'm 40. I mean, I'm not 40, not even fucking close. All right, guys. But I'm a grown man. I can handle it. I'll take care of it. I'll figure it out myself. But the fact that he shifted the blame from himself to his son in order to make sure his name wasn't attached with it, and now he's trying to coach his son through how to get out of it, just tells you about the man that he is. And that's we talked about it before, about him not doing home visits, him the way he carries himself. I would never trust my son to play for a man that carries himself in that way, ever.
And it's I think Deion's house is built on.
And here you go. And this is why he only has 5 players in the graduating class beyond 2025, because nobody is going to trust their son to play for a man that carries himself that way. And I don't want to blow this up into something bigger than it is. Like, I understand the business side of it. I understand why they're doing what they're doing. They are trying to use the system that is there to get out of a situation. I get that. I understand that. And the system's there for a reason. And it unfortunately, wealthy people like Deion Sanders use that system to their advantage every single day. And that's just life. But it speaks to the character of a man when he does something like that. And when he, especially when it's his own son. And I think that speaks to the character of who he is as a person. It speaks to the character of who he is as a coach. And it speaks to why he's losing people to the transfer portal and having to flip his roster every year, because people eventually see through that bullshit, especially at higher levels of competition. So every level he climbs up, it's going to be seen through quicker.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why last year was a hot start, right? And played a bunch of shitty teams. You won 4 games. Good job. Next year, we'll see. I mean, I thought Deion could be successful, but after this entire offseason, everything that's gone on, the Twitter beefs, the rap videos by Shador, the bullshit on bullshit on bullshit, and now this, dude, he's done in a year. He's done. He's gone. He'll go back to living his life on the NFL Network.
Uh I think coaching has not. This is my last point on the Dion thing. I think that when you do things like the way he has been conducting business, like he has at Colorado, eventually your chickens come home to roost. And I
Yeah,
think this is a direct correlation of how you treat people, how you conduct yourself as a program, and I just think that's what it
yeah,
is. And will Shiloh pay the money? We'll
probably not.
see.
Probably
But
not.
the
And you
guy's
know what? I feel bad for the guy. But yeah, no, I mean, in all likelihood, he'll probably get his bankruptcy approved and never have to pay that money. That sucks, but what are
mm,
you gonna do?
and
But
it's
on top of that, yeah, I agree. I think the chickens are coming home to roost. Eventually, fake people are seen through. I've heard too many stories from people that played with Dion, from people that were around the game that said that this is exactly who he is. He's always been about Dion. He's always been about himself. And a lot of the stuff that he says is genuinely what he believes, but it's not who he is. So the whole, put God first, Jesus and all that, like there's, he believes that about himself. He believes he's a man of God. He believes that faith carries him, but he doesn't live it every day. And there's a lot of people like that. I'm not just singling him out. That's a very common thing. But I think it speaks to his character. And I'm not beyond making mistakes in my own life and things like that. So I'm not sitting here holier than thou or anything. But I'm also not the head coach of a major football program trying to mold men or mold young kids into men. So it's a little different.
right. And I guess time will tell and we will see how it goes. But I guess we were an hour, almost an hour and 20 in. It flew by. And everybody have a great night. And this is the Andre Duke Show with Carter Smith. Have a good one, guys.
Make sure you go on YouTube, like and subscribe, comment on the video, tell us we're idiots. I don't care. But just go on there, comment, work the algorithm, get us going here. Got a lot of big plans for in season. Right now, I know the content is very sparse, to say the least. But we're going to be doing this show multiple times a week in season, talking a little more Notre Dame, but also talking a lot about the national landscape of college football, probably some NFL, probably, whatever's going on. But go out there, like and subscribe, give us a follow, wherever you get your podcasts or anything like that. It always helps. So appreciate everybody that's listening. Thank you for the engagement. It's always fun to interact with you guys.
Yes, sir. And with that, I'm going to end the show. Have a good night, people.